It is an absolutely glorious day here in Chicago, and that makes me want to grill. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to show you how to prepare one of the Yucatan's most famous dishes. It's called Poc Chuc. Now, there's a bunch of different varieties of it, but my favorite version of it is the one where they pound meat thin and then they marinate it in a tangy marinade and they grill it over a hot, hot fire. It's got all of these really fresh and beautiful accompaniments that I think really make that dish special. Maybe some of you remember on Mexico One Plate at a Time when I took you to the town of Mani, to the Señorío del Tutulxu. It's my favorite place to eat Poc Chuc. And I showed you how they grill it and all. Well, since then, I have made it over and over again, and I've learned a few things. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. So I've got a hot grill here. And the first thing that we have to do, before we even talk about the meat and the marinade and the accompaniments, the other accompaniments, is to bury these 2 white onions in the coals. So I started the fire a little while ago. I'm going to move the grill grate. I like to work with a cast iron grill grate because it holds heat and distributes it so beautifully. And I'm going to put these 2 onions down in here, and then I'm just going to kind of bury them. These will take about 20 to 30 minutes for them to actually char on the outside and get really soft and slightly smoky on the inside. So we'll come back out and flip them around and make sure that they're charring in the right ways. You want a pretty hot fire to do this so that in 20 minutes they'll be done. But they'll be black on the outside. Now I'm going to take you back to the kitchen and we'll talk meat and marinade. So this is a pork dish, but in Mexico they typically make it with pork leg. You hardly ever see pork leg in the United States because we use the pork legs to make ham out of. So I'm going to take you through this using a pork loin, and I think you all are going to really like this version of it. It's just an absolutely surefire way to get to great Poc Chuc. But it's going to require a little bit of knife work. Now you could go to your grocery store and look for very thin boneless pork chops. And if you can find those, then the cutting part of it is already done for you. But I'm going to take this piece of pork loin here and I'm going to cut it into 1/4 inch slices. Now that it's all in even pieces, I'm going to one at a time pound these pieces into 1/8 inch thick pieces. For that, I'm going to need a mallet. I'm a lucky guy to have this big brass mallet that my wife brought back from a trip, the culinary trip she was on in Greece. So it does all the work, but any kind of a mallet, even a heavy saucepan could be used for this kind of a thing. If you have a cleaver, you can use a cleaver to pound things out. I cover with plastic. You notice that I'm working on an easily cleanable cutting board here, and that actually works really well for this part of it as well. And just a few pounds like that will give me what I'm looking for. Take the top piece of plastic off and you can see what we've got there. I'm going to go through this stack now and pound them all out. Okay, so it's all pounded out now. Every time I go to that really famous place in the Yucatan and have the opportunity to eat my Poc Chuc, I notice that the pork seems to have a slightly cured texture, meaning that it's moving in that sort of ham-like direction. So that's what I'm going to show you how to achieve today. It's just what we would call a dry brine. So I'm going to sprinkle salt on this, but it's going to be a measured amount. We started with a 1.5 pounds here of the pork loin, and because this is such a lean cut and we want it to come out really beautiful and juicy, I'm going to put on 2 teaspoons of salt, and that's going to kind of cure it. But what I'm going to have to do here is lightly sprinkle it on both sides of the pork, and you'll see how I'm sort of evenly getting it on top of everything. Then we'll lay those guys back down like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Just give it a nice even coating of salt on each side, like that. Now I'm going to lay these guys back down, but now I have to turn everything over and I have to salt the other side. Now you might think that this is going to make the pork salty, but it's not. Trust me on this. It's a measured amount. I'm going to lay them out and let them just do their general brining, dry brining for about 45 minutes. I suggest that when you make this, you set a timer for that so that we can know that the right amount of cure is happening to the pork. Now, what makes Poc Chuc so special in the Yucatan is that they have these sour oranges. Now, that doesn't just mean your regular juice orange that's not very ripe and tastes sour. It's actually a different subspecies of orange. And it's the sour orange that's sometimes called Seville orange. It's what the sour orange marmalade is made out of. But it's used extensively in the Yucatan for marinating things and giving them this really bright flavor. It's as sour as a lemon, but has hints of orange. Now, that's not something that's available to most of us. So my approach to making my sort of mock sour orange juice is to fresh squeeze some lime juice. I've got 3/4 of a cup of lime juice, and then I just add 1/4 cup of fresh sweet orange juice. That gives me about the sourness of a lemon with the hint of orange flavor there. Now I've made my mock sour orange juice, but I'm going to pour off 1/3 cup of it because this 1/3 of the cup is going to be the marinade for the meat. We'll use the rest of it to season other parts of this dish. I need to chop up some garlic. I've already peeled these garlic cloves, and I want to chop them fine. So when I'm going to do that, I first slice them very fine, and then I will just rock and chop across them, constantly pulling everything back to center, rocking and chopping until I get a very fine mince on it. Okay, the chopped garlic is going to go into the 1/3 cup of mock sour orange juice there. Now, some people like to grate the garlic, or other people like to push it through a garlic press. You could do any of those things. By the time I have cleaned the grater or the garlic press, I can have the stuff already chopped. So that's the way I usually do that. No salt is going to go in here because we've already salted the meat, but we are going to season it pretty highly with black pepper. I suggest about 1/2 teaspoon, but that's going to make it pretty peppery. So you can see what you like. That's what I'm going to put in there. Okay, now we've got the marinade for the meat ready. And we now need to get all of the beautiful fresh garnishes together that are going to go on the platter underneath this pork. So we have cabbage to do. And I like to use Napa cabbage or Savoy cabbage because it's a little more tender. So I'm going to slice some of that. I've got an avocado here that I will slice up as well as some tomatoes that make this beautiful dish so special. Time to marinate the meat. I'm going to stir this up just to make sure everything is evenly distributed, and then evenly pour it over the pork, which is now dry brined for its 45 minutes or so. Now I'm going to continue to put all of that garlic there, and then with a pair of tongs, make sure that each piece is just nicely coated with the liquid of the marinade. Okay, that's looking pretty good now. We're going to set this aside for 10 minutes while we finish the seasonings on all the rest of the ingredients that go along with the poc chuc. If we leave it more than the 10 minutes, this is what you want to do right before you grill, because if we leave it more than the 10 minutes, it's actually going to change the texture of the pork drastically. You're going to make basically ceviche out of pork, and you don't really want to do that. The cabbage and the cilantro, I'm going to toss with some of our mock sour orange here, just a few tablespoons of it, and give that some salt as well. As I'm going to use these guys here to just toss everything. Now you'll want to taste this. This will begin to wilt just a little bit as it sits, but we want it to still be fresh and crunchy, but we want it to be nicely seasoned. This is a very light dressing that goes on this because it's just that sour orange juice and salt. But I want enough salt in there to really give it a nice seasoning, and it doesn't just taste like plain old raw cabbage. That should do that. Okay, I've got a platter that I'm going to start building here because the presentation on poc chuc to me is really a wonderful thing. So I'm going to put this cabbage now down the center here of the platter. And then on the sides, I can shingle out the tomatoes. All these guys will go on one side, and then I'm going to sprinkle them with salt and pepper. Remember, we've got all raw vegetables here, so we have to season them as well. All of this is super important in the making of the poc chuc. If you have that wonderful flake Maldon salt, it's really good on the tomatoes. And this is a great dish to do in the middle of the summer when you can get tomatoes from the farmer's market or off of your own plants. So on top of these guys, I'm going to put some of the avocados and a little salt over the top of the avocado, and then pepper over everything. That looks great. Okay. I removed these onions from the coals after about 20 minutes. Now we have the last part of it, and to me, this is the most spectacular part of this whole dish, and that is the ember roasted onions. So they don't look very pretty right now, but when we get finished with them, this is going to be really great. What I like to do is to cut the ends off of the onions like that, then cut a little strip like that, and peel back the onion skin, the burnt onion skin. I think I have to give up that one. I'm going to do the same thing to this other. Then cut the onion in half, and I'm looking for about 1/2-inch pieces here, so cut across. It's going to be a little slippery, so watch this, and then kind of hold it all together as you gently cut down through it like that. I think I can get almost one way out. You see how slippery it is. Okay, so there's that piece of it. Now I got to just do that with all the rest of it. Now I'm going to scoop all of that into a bowl, and then we're going to season it with the last little bit of our mock sour orange juice and a big pinch of salt. And that'll go in there. Stir that all around, and we will have marinated ember roasted onions to put over the meat that we're ready to grill. So I'll meet you back out at the grill now. When everybody is gathered, you got to have a very hot fire, and you just pick up the little thin pounded pieces of pork loin that you've marinated in the sour orange, and you just drop them on. Now, of course, get all of the marinade that you can off of them and lay them on a hot fire. And they really shouldn't take more than about 1.5 to 2 minutes per side to cook through. But we want to get a nice little char on them. And there you have a absolutely spectacular platter of Poc Chuc estilo yucateco. I'm taking the onions that have now marinated in the sour orange replacement and putting them over the top of the meat like that. You could serve them on the side too, but I think it's so beautiful to just see them on the top like that. A couple of sprigs of cilantro, maybe just some leaves I'll pull off of here and let them fall down on this beauty here. We've got the roasted habanero salsa seasoned with salt and lime juice. That explosive stuff, the droplets of on this Poc Chuc are spectacular. Chile tomate made in the Yucatan style, a roasted tomato sauce, classic accompaniment to go with it. And I think this is the perfect thing to have on a beautiful day.